Currently, there are only 2 operational submersibles capable of getting to 6,000 metres, or a little bit more. And that's the Chinese submersible and the Japanese submersible, but they're not rated to full ocean depth. So to get to 6,500 or 7,000 metres with no subs means that you've gone to the maximum depth they can go to. So let's take 7,000 metres as cut-off. Who's been deeper than that, and who could have gone all the way but didn't because they were doing it for science and not for hero dives? So if you tally up those who have only just crossed the halo boundary to these other submersibles, that it's probably actually quite a lot. But when you go to that bottom 2%, it's very, very little. So if you ask people, how many people have been to the bottom Challenger Deep, they would probably say Picard and Walsh in 1960 and James Cameron in 2012. But I think it's much more interesting than that. So last year, of course, the 5 Deeps went and put another 5 people to Challenger Deep, but even that doesn't tell the whole story, because there were other subs that did some really deep stuff in that bottom 2% long before any of these other subs came along. The one in particular is called the Archimède, which is a French Navy submarine. It was commissioned in 1961. A massive thing as well. It's huge. It actually did 226 dives, covered the Japan Trench, Puerto Rico Trench, it worked off the Azores, Mediterranean. 26 of those dives were deeper than 5,000 metres, and of those 17 were deeper than 6,000. Of those, 11 were deeper than 7,000. So that's quite impressive, right? And nobody's really heard of the Archimède, and it was partly because they were doing good science and doing some really interesting work all over the world. But at the same time, Trieste had banged the deepest place in the world, and that's the one that stamped in everybody's psyche, and nobody really bothered about this other one, even though it was doing more and actually doing real exploration and so on.
As a community, we got so much more from the Archimède.
Yeah, absolutely. Some of these guys were going extraordinarily deep. They should be up there in the Hall of Fame, if you like. So if you take the Trieste, the Limiting Factor, the Deepsea Challenger and the Archimède, these 4 subs that have been very, very deep. There has been, I would say, 26 full ocean depth dives. But by the time anyone hears this podcast, there will have been 39. So let's just pretend in the next 2 weeks that these dives actually go ahead. So there's been 39 full ocean depth submersible dives to depths greater than 7,000 metres, and that delivered 30 people to the bottom 2% of the planet. So 4 of those 39 dives were the Trieste and Deepsea Challenger, 11 were in the Archimède, and the rest were in the Limiting Factor. But I want to go back to Archimède for a second, because its extensive diving history is quite impressive. If you compare it to the Trieste, for example, the Trieste did 41 dives over 5 years, which is 8.5 dives per year. Archimède did 226 and 13, that's 17.5 dives per year during its lifetime, of which 11 were greater than 7,000 metres. And the Archimède put 13 people to depth greater than 7,000 metres before Neil Armstrong ever landed on the moon. So 13 people had been beyond 7 kilometres underwater before the Apollo programme.